Hi, welcome to the West Coast Dowsers Conference. Today's Friday, July 5th, 2024. My name is Brandon Day, and the name of my talk is Divining for Physical Ascension. So, this is the first time I've ever actually taught this to a class. I do teach this process. I have a number of students, and so I do teach this process, but this is the first time it goes out to a class. So please bear with me. I also just found out that I teach today and on Sunday, so both of the classes will work together. And a lot of these principles, there's a saying, as it is in the beginning, so shall it be in the end. And what I found in this process is that we always come back to the basics. Just like in any wonderful divining process, you're always coming back to like checking, is this yes, is this no? You're always coming back to the beginning. So in any divining process, it's critical to be able to think one thought at a time. The ability to think one thought with an unclouded mind is absolute paramount. Because if you're working to check something, you can't be checking on what's for dinner and what did I eat last night, and you can't be checking sorry, are we're good? Okay. You think?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is just the most important thing I think that any diviner of any realm of expertise, somebody who's looking for water can't be thinking about the dog while he's looking for water or she's looking for water. That's impossible. You won't get 100% reliable results all the time. So that has been my passion, is getting to 100% reliable results. Now, herein lies the problem. We think in this realm mostly physical. We don't really understand the point of what quantum fields are bringing forth that says this is all a hologram. So we can begin to understand that this is a hologram, but living as though this is a hologram is a whole nother tricky science, a very physical science. So if this is a hologram, then who is the projector, right? What is not the hologram? You know, what is the creator of the hologram? And that is essentially becoming one with it, as I call it. A lot of people kind of think different things when I call it, when I call the unnameable thing that people call God or people call it the creator. When I call it, it tends to make people feel like, well, that's not very personal. But to me, it's the ultimate personal. I've never heard any complaints from above of me calling it, because I don't have any better word for it. So it is projecting into this physical reality, and it being the higher self, has created a situation where all of the physical world, this paper, this desk, this pen, this room, each one of you is pushing me toward enlightenment. Actually, this is really what's happening, is that the whole physical world is designed to push us to ultimate realization. And that's how I've found that this whole reality works. So either it's going to crush you or it's going to raise you up. And the crushing is part of the raising up. It's the dying part of the phoenix. And so what I wanted to get out here to everybody is, what does this physical process look like? What does it look like in physical reality? So in this process that I teach, there are 5 major reference points. And the reason that I use reference points is that every science uses reference points. If no one knew what 1 was, there would be no math. Every science has its points of reference that you go back to no matter what. And those constants allow us to extrapolate and build upon something that's reliable, rock solid. So in this divining technique, we teach that there's the inner child, I've been into this before in the last conference. I touched on this, but because I'm teaching a different kind of class, we're going to really jump into these 5 reference points, specifically 4 of them very deeply. So the inner child is, depending on how healthy it is, will be somewhere around the belly button. It could be a little bit lower if, let's say, your inner child isn't healthy or robust, and it'll be slightly above the belly button if your inner child is like doing fantastic. What I should say about the inner child is that the inner child carries the original spiritual DNA template for the body. So as it was in the beginning with you, who you were before you were born, that's who the inner child is. So and it's an incredible body of power. A lot of people address the inner child in inner child work by saying things like, which I did too. I began the inner child work 20 years ago, strong inner child work 20 years ago. And what I found in the end is that I could have used this process and it could have gone down to months rather than years. And it's a scientific process. So the inner child is that original being. And it can be sitting inside of you, very weak, you could say, but it's there. And that shows and that proves that it is a position of power within you. Because if any of us went 15 or 20 years, much less 30 or 40 or 80 years without eating any food, we would all be dead. But the inner child is sitting there perfectly intact. So that proves that it is a position of power within us that's not going anywhere. So the inner child doesn't need to be coddled to. It doesn't need to be told, oh dear, I'm so sorry that I left you so many years ago. And all of this has, in my opinion, gotten us very small increments of personal growth for all of us who have done inner child work. It's a lot of dues paid and very little results. So what I found is that we'll move to another center now. There's the Sacred Heart, which in the opening ceremony they were calling the high heart. I normally call it the upper heart. It's in the thymus region. And the upper heart is concerned primarily with the spiritual body as it relates to the physical body. So the higher self as it translates into this physical world, that's what the Sacred Heart is specifically concerned about. So I moved up here to this one to say that everything happening beneath the heart is more or less in the beginning, it looks like a battle between the inner child and the divine ego. Now, so that moves me on to the divine ego. It's located in the spleen, or that's where its home is. The ego, when I first started searching for the ego, I found that it was here and here and here, and it could be just anywhere, all over the place. The ego is everywhere. So I said, well, that's a useless piece of information. Does it have a home in the body, somewhere where I can constantly contact the ego? Because just to go back, I've found that the ego has been the whooping boy of everybody. It's not even just the whipping boy of the spiritual community. Everybody talks trash about the ego. Everybody. It's like, oh, it's like the blame, the ultimate scapegoat is the ego. So I started to think like, well, how is the ego the one that's saving my physical life all the time? The one that's letting me know if there's a physical problem, a physical danger. Don't eat this. Don't step out on the street right now. How is the ego saving my life and destroying my relationships and destroying my life at the same time? It just doesn't add up. So I started to really look into, well, what is the ego really doing, and are we misplacing blame on the ego? So what I found was that most of the problems that we relate to ego are, and I don't want to get much into this at all, but what I found so far is that that the problems with the ego are more so related to things like multiple personalities, the way that we can be one person right now and one person later on. The way that we, and again, I have to apologize for this because I don't have any better words for it, but the way that we get possessed at any given time. We eat a food that's incorrect for us, and it brings us into an alter energy because we've taken something into our bodies, and it's foreign to us. So it changes our chemistry, and now all of a sudden we're on a different bandwidth than our original bandwidth. So people call that possession. So I'm just using that term because that's something that I think we can all agree that we can go to dinner and eat a certain dish and we walk away from it irritated, maybe angry, maybe sad. Some of us can feel the energy of the meat or the plants that we've eaten, and it changes us. So that's what I'm talking about. So a lot of people blame those things on ego. My ego made me afraid. My ego made me act out against this person. Well, what I've found is that it's best to just know that the ego is the survivor. No one in this world that I've ever heard about killing the ego, that I check on my pendulum, that these people who talk about killing the ego, I don't get that that's the truth. I mean, I've never gotten that anybody's destroyed the ego until they leave the body. Then the ego's job is done. It gets to, I don't know, be dissolved, do whatever egos do whenever. I haven't experienced that yet, so I don't know. So the ego is the survivor. It's this divine body. When I address the ego, in the beginning, I'll say something like I'm cooing it. Like I'm saying, hey, you are really awesome. You kept me alive all this time. You're super special. I adore you. This is how I address the ego. And I do it with my hands on my spleen. And I address the ego in this way, like, hey, super special ego. Like, because when I feel into this body, I can feel a fear that is irrational. It doesn't make sense. I'm sitting in this room. None of you are going to shoot me, hopefully. And hopefully there's no airplane going to crash into the room. But I trust the ego so much that if an airplane's going to crash into the room, I'm going to say, hey guys, you want to go outside for a minute and we'll do another process, because that's the ego. The ego will say, hey, just step over here. I equate this to, all of you guys are pretty much my age, maybe a little bit older. Do you remember the cartoons that used to have the baby, and the baby would, like, it was a Looney Tunes thing, and the baby would be crawling in a construction area, and whoever was supposed to be watching the baby would be freaking out and getting themselves hurt. But this baby would be like innocently crawling on these skyscrapers and high rises and doing all of these things that the baby was built to survive. So I would say that the baby, in this case, has a very healthy ego. The ego is just doing great and guiding this little baby on this wonderful adventure, and nobody gets hurt except the person who's worrying about the baby gets very hurt. And that cartoon is a great analogy for the ego. So when you can talk to the ego in this way, put the hand on the spleen and address the ego and say, hey, my beautiful ego, relax. I know that you had to be in control all of this time because me, the real me, the master, was not home. I went away because all of us had to go away to a certain amount when we were children because of trauma. Life was too painful. We didn't understand pain. We didn't understand the nature of this world. Our parents didn't understand that we were spiritual beings in a physical body and what this whole thing was about. I mean, my childhood was quite painful. So when I was 8 years old, even though I tried my best to hang on until then, when I was 8 years old, I checked out. I went to sleep. I was really not responsible for very much between 8 and 19 years old. So that essentially, I think, happened to most of us, or possibly all of us, that we recede back into our consciousness and we go to sleep until we are adults and we have adult power and we can wake up with adult force, because now we're not victims to this painful world anymore of where people don't understand us. So if you can address the ego in this way, and say, hey, ego, super special ego, relax. We're not in any danger. If we are in any danger, I want to know. But now the master's home. Now I'm home. The one that, it's as if the ego has had to run our whole factory when we went to sleep. So the ego is supposed to come in and do a little shift here and there. And then one day we checked out. Now all of a sudden the body that's supposed to do a little shift here and there is responsible for everything. So of course it's going to be crazy. Any of us would be crazy if we had to keep a factory going by ourselves when we're not even designed to run a factory by ourselves that way. So that's how we have to talk with the ego, as if it is, in a way, the victim of the situation, not the perpetrator, not the fault one. But like, hey, you're really strung out. You have to drink coffee 24/7. You know, you have to do these shifts for years on end. Of course you're crazy. Of course you're going to be afraid of everything because you're the one who's been in charge of keeping this vehicle alive for all these years. So relax. Take a nap. If there's anything danger going on, I want to know, little ego. I'm listening. I'm listening. So that way the ego knows, one, it can relax, and two, if it has an important message for you, you're going to get it. So this is how to address the ego in whatever your individual way is. I'm just kind of showing the framework of how to address the ego. It's basically like, hey, you're really awesome, but relax, the master's home. So if you have any information for me, tell me, because I want to know. But until then, lie there and be quiet. Just relax. And what I found is that a purr comes up in my system. I feel it like a little vibration, as if there's like a cat purring inside of me. It's literally like a purr. Or I know there's a lot of animals, cows purr, a lot of animals purr. And there's like a vibration, like a purr that begins to happen in my spleen. And that's how I know that the ego is chill. And that's the perfect place. Because when the ego's chill, the inner child gets to rise up. Because what's been happening is essentially a battle of the consciousness within the lower faculties beneath the heart center, beneath the sacred heart. There's been a battle going on, and that battle has been for space between the ego and the divine inner child. So when the ego chills out, the inner child automatically begins to grow. And I know that was a long story to tell a simple point, but that's kind of how I work, is by telling stories, because they tend to tell a more rounded picture. So inner child work, I would almost avoid altogether. If I was going to say do inner child work directly or indirectly, 100% of the time, I would say do ego work. Like, get your ego to relax. Then your inner child will automatically raise up into your abdomen and begin to bloom. Automatically, by default. So this is an indirect way of addressing the inner child that really works quickly. Okay? And the reason we're starting down here instead of the higher self is a lot of people think, well, I want to be the higher self in this physical body. Well, like, okay, but do you really? Like, are you sure? Because every travesty that happens in this world is a projection of a higher self. And I don't think we want to just jump directly in and be at the whim of the higher self, because the higher self doesn't really care about this physical reality in the same way that we do, in the same way that the ego does. So this is a process that I like teaching from the bottom up, so that by the time we get to the top of the mountain, we fully understand the bottom of the mountain. That, you know, because if we don't, then the top of the mountain will come crashing down if we don't fully understand the bottom. So this is the base, this is the bottom. So when we do this and we begin to really get the ego to relax, granted, you might have to take out poisonous foods out of your environment. You might have to take certain things out of your environment, because remember, this is divining for physical ascension. So there's a lot of things that will go along the way. I've had to get rid of every object that I've owned more than once to get here. Because objects themselves, remember I said in the beginning that this whole physical reality is trying to push us all toward self-realization, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. So if it's trying to push us, then that means that means something that's twofold to me. Any object is going to raise me up or it's going to pull me down. Objects, physical objects themselves. Because Elon Musk came out and said not very long ago, we're all cyborgs. And from what I see, that's absolutely true. We are connected to what we own. We have chosen these connections. So choosing the correct cell phone, and I'll get into what correct is here in a minute. Choosing the correct cell phone that's going to get us to where we want, propel us to our higher self, the correct computer that propels us to our higher self, the correct car that when you drive it, your higher self is blooming. These are the things that we ultimately want to do, because this one up here projecting down here does not care what we like. I mean, it's the opposite. In fact, I think our likes, our desires are probably the biggest trap in this physical world. Because for one, they're based on what we know already. And how can the known free us? Are we free right now? Well, right now we know everything that we know. So what I've found in divining is that it really opens up this mystery where if I don't care what I like, I don't care what I prefer, I don't care what I know, outside of my few simple reference points, if I don't care about any of that, I'm led on this grand adventure. And this grand adventure, you know, it's said that we have to have the mind of a little child to get into heaven. And that's what I've found is like the biggest gift of divining, true divining, is it will scientifically develop the mind of a child. It will put us directly in the unknown adventure of, wow, what am I going to find today? I wonder what I'm going to eat today. You know, geez, well, where do I start? Okay, so is what I need to eat today from a store? And you know, then you check that. Well, okay, so is it from this store, or this store? Right? Is it from a restaurant? Like, so it's this adventure, this wide open adventure of like, how is today? Because if today is really a new day, and it clearly is, today is never going to be yesterday, ever. In the history of today's never been yesterday. So how today, what do I need to do today? And what is it that I need right now that is going to propel me to my higher self? So we're getting ready to go into the divining system. I want to make sure that we're all kind of clear right now on what's going on from here down, because I don't advise anybody to really start in the higher self, which is about 3 to 4 inches above the head is where the reference point for the higher self is. I advise everybody to do what I did, which is stick to the Sacred Heart for a time. And when you stick to the Sacred Heart as a reference point for a time, or the higher heart as high heart, as they were calling it, whatever you want to call it, as long as it's located in the thymus and you relate it to the spiritual heart, call it what you want. But I want to make sure that we're all kind of clear and on the same page before we get into move into the system, and I'll start showing people things on the whiteboard. Mm-hmm.
Well, you just went through 3
Mm-hmm.
of the 5.
Yes.
What
Yes.
about the other 2?
The other 2 reference points.
Maybe
Mm-hmm.
repeat the question because not everybody
Sure.
can hear me.
So the question was, I went through 3 of the 5 reference points. What are the other 2? So the other 2 are the higher self, which is again located 3 to 4 inches above the head. It's above the head. It doesn't sit in the crown. It's not in the pineal organ, and the reason I say organ is that everybody calls it a gland, but every time I check, it's an organ. Every time I check, the pineal is an organ. So I don't know why people call it a gland. Maybe it's because it's not functioning like it should. But I've checked other glands, and they are truly glands. But the pineal is clearly an organ when I check. So it's not there. It's not on the head. It's above the head. And I'm saying this over and over again because I have close students and they get tricked on this, and they don't go above the head to check for the higher self. They tend to go to the top of the head and, kind of get lazy that way. And then there's the place where what I call this one is where the Creator entered into the body in the beginning, because we are all little creators. Call us what you want. It's very clear that we're out here creating, and that this is either a playground or a school for the creators. That's what's very obvious to me. Look at it how you want. Some of us are more comfortable in schools like me. Some people are more comfortable with playgrounds. The thing is, we got to play by the rules. And so the Creator entered into the body somewhere right over here in the region of the heart. And it's a specific reference point. I don't use it very often, but I've started to teach it to people because it's very important to understand that what we would call the Creator actually lives inside of us. It's not something that you want to go searching outside of yourself too long for, because it's right here. And if we look at ourselves as little creators, or as the Creator in a body, it just makes the whole process a lot more simple for us to understand, well, what am I doing here? What am I creating here? Because if we're creating hell on earth, then we get to live in it. That's the nature of creation. That's fair. And if we're creating heaven on earth, then we get to live there too, because it's fair. So I can be creating something over here, and which might be heaven on earth, and somebody else right next to me could be creating hell on earth, and they get to live in their creation, and I get to live in mine. That's why I'm always focused on my creation, and why I don't try and stop anybody from focusing on theirs, because I want to be free to create what I want to create in this world. So wouldn't I want others to be free to create whatever it is they want to create too? I'm not standing in anyone's way. So their creation will show them what they need to be shown, and that's the process of me saying that everything is leading one to enlightenment. So even if somebody is creating hell on earth, it's still, in my opinion, leading them to enlightenment. It's going to get them what they need to get in order to get to where the higher self wants them to be. So,
You have a comment about the interface between those two worlds, whether it's long distance or the person's right next to you. Dowsers talk a lot about protection. We talk about our energy fields going out, and so thus, anyway, your point on that.
Yeah.
And maybe repeat
Are you asking? Are you talking about, like, if I'm in public, divining around people, how
no,
do?
Just in general.
In general about protection?
We all have our heaven and hell, or
Yeah.
heaven and hell, and how your system.
How my
views
system deals with somebody next to me or down the street or wherever
whether they're
that might be.
intending for their hell to be over me, or they're intending for their heaven, or we're just.
Right. Or even if they're, let's just say worst case scenario, if they have bad intentions for me.
Exactly.
Okay.
But just being
How do I deal with that?
Yeah, we're just-
Well, I focus on my creation. Again, focusing on one thing at a time. I can't focus on my creation and focus on being attacked at the same time. So I don't do anything. I really work to do what I need to do. And in that, I don't like to focus on protection. It doesn't really bring me joy to focus on protection. It brings me joy to focus on, well, what am I doing? Do I want to create a world where everybody has to defend themselves from some invisible force that's stronger than they are? I don't. But at the same time, I understand, and I mean, I really understand what's going on in this world. A long time ago, I went on a vision quest, and in the 90s, and stayed on this vision quest for a year. And on this vision quest, this guy, I mean, the ultimate wily-haired conspiracy theorist, picks me up, and he's like, you need to know what's going on in this world, or you're not any good to any of us. So I learned a long time ago, half my life ago, really what turns out now to be true about what's going on in the world. So I understand evil, and I still believe in bad people being able to do what they want to do. I mean, I really do. I don't like getting in anyone's way, because I don't want to create a world where people can get in my way. Because if I'm trying to stop people from their creation, that tells all of creation that I want to be stopped from my creation. And I don't want that. I want to be free to create what is put in my heart to create. So I don't work much on protecting myself at all. It's just not really my business. My business is creation, not protection. Like, I protect children when I'm around them. I protect women. I protect innocence. I protect my garden. I protect my cat. Because that's the kind of creator that I want to be, a nurturing creator that nurtures what's around him. But as far as I go personally, I don't really see a reason to protect myself, is the truth. Because if what's inside of me, which is the creator, needs to create something, then what is more powerful than that? And I'll get into the darkness just another little bit, and then I'm going to leave it alone, unless you have some more questions. But I've never met somebody who does, like, let's just say, witchy things in the bad sense. I've never met one who really knew who they were. I've met lots of them. I've met lots of them. I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, which, if you know anything about the occult, you would know that Charleston is the occult home of America. So yeah, Charleston is that way. So I've been around, you could say, the worst of people, and I just think they just don't know really what they're doing. I don't really think they really understand what they're doing and the way that they're taking care of themselves. They're undoing themselves. And it's not because I want that to be the case. It's because that's the way this reality works, where I like to say, when I say that we're all creators, I could say, well, we're all bakers. But the thing is, we have to taste our own creation. So if I bake salty cakes and I use salt instead of sugar, well, I have to eat that cake. And next time I better understand, where the sugar is and why all crystals are not the same. So it's like that when I say we're all creators. We're all bakers. We get to taste our own creation. Now, before the 2012 event goes, it really did look to me like realities were blended, where like the worlds were blended in a way that it was impossible to pull them apart. But since 2012, it really looks to me, and I mean every day passes and it looks to me like these worlds are separating even further, to where the people who need hell on earth, they're going to get it. Those of us who need heaven on earth, we're clearly going to get it. And it's not because I have ill will toward anyone. Because if I had ill will toward anyone, I would have ill will toward myself. And that's not cool. Mm-hmm.
It sounds to me like I get the sense that because you are so focused on your own creation, that almost automatically sets up a bubble.
I think it does.
You don't have to worry about anybody else.
Yeah, so you were saying that because I'm so focused on my own creation, it's almost as if it creates a bubble.
Right.
And it does, it absolutely does. Because I'm one thing. I'm in the grocery store and I'm checking something, and so I brought a couple of pendulums. I'll give a demonstration in a minute. This is the one I had to grab this morning. And if I'm in the grocery store, inevitably people come along and they look at us and they try and sort of push the pendulum around. Has anyone experienced that?
No.
No?
I've used mine in a store, but I haven't had any flack from anybody.
Yeah. Well, I don't want. It's not flack. I haven't received flack from anybody. More curiosity, and worst case scenario, they're seeing, well, can I affect it? And I have experienced a lot of that, and I think that's natural. I don't think there's anything necessarily diabolical to it, but if I'm not 100% focused on what I'm doing, there could be problems. Because, and sometimes my pendulum would be moving, and someone walks past me, and my pendulum goes like dead. And a lot of us who do water dowsing, we know that Either you got it or you don't, in a lot of cases. There's some people who just can't do it, and some of us who it just comes naturally. So whenever my pendulum stops, whenever someone walks, I just get right back to my focus, and I'm focused. What's food for today? So I want to get into reference points a little bit, and I'll see if I can find this marker.
Say something on that one
Sure.
subject though, and I learned this early on because of a very traumatic experience. There is no good or bad, there's just an experience. However, there is karma. So
Yes.
if you create bad, there's karma affected. And if you create good, there's karma affected.
Yep.
So what you're doing is, by good, you're building up the shield of God, your
Right.
armor of God.
Right.
And that's what gives us the freedom of not feeling we need protection, because it's the karma that we put in, the positivity that gives us that shield of God. That
Right.
has that freedom to
Yes.
live in peace and
Yes.
harmony with your experience.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, I completely agree with you. I tend to steer away from the word karma because people think English is a type of a language where I can say one word and everybody in the room has an interpretation of the word I just used, and none of them are exactly the way I was using it. You know, so karma is like that. But yes, as you create good karma,
It has an effect.
it
Everything
has
you do has an effect.
exactly,
Whether you wanna call it
and
karma
that's
or
how
not.
I use it. I like
Yeah.
cause and effect.
Right.
Action and, you know, it's
So,
what,
right.
yeah,
Action, reaction.
yeah, action and reaction, yeah. And that is my protection.
And when you're young and something really traumatic happens and you're sitting there going, what?
Yeah.
And they'll just, well, that's the experience.
Right,
You're going to be a better person for this.
yeah, that's true.
How is that going to happen? And it did.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, a lot of what I learned as a child for a certain time was what not to do. And then when I became an adult, I realized like the reason my life wasn't way harder than it had to be is that my parents were absolute disciplinarians. So that gave me something that now these young kids, I say a lot of times that the children now, they have way more power than we have. But it's insignificant because I have control of my power. So, and they're absolutely out of control. So who cares if they have more power? The fact is, old people run the world. My generation's just coming into that right now, just coming into the position of power in the world. And old people run the world for a good reason, because children would absolutely destroy it. You know, we've seen them in grocery stores, you know, absolutely destroying everyone's world because they want something, you know. So I love elders and seniors and, you know, people that are senior to me and know more than me. And you're absolutely right about the karma thing. If we will get back something, no matter what we create. So like the baker analogy, you better make sure it's a good cake because you're going to have to eat it. Now, like I was saying before the 2012 event, it really did look to me like people were taking my cake and eating it. And people were giving me their cakes and I was having to eat their cakes. But I can at least speak to after the 2012 event, because the process that I went through of this trial by fire initiation that I spoke about last night, it burned away the old Brandon. I mean, I burned for a long time, and it changed my body, it changed my skin. I'm permeable now. It's like my skin breathes. And so if I create the wrong thing, boy, does it come back quick. And I'm like, oh, whoa, do not think that thought. And if we really understood who we are as creators, we would tend one thing in this whole universe, our thoughts, because everything comes from our thoughts. So yeah, we got to watch, we got to create the right thoughts, because we will end up eating them. Mm-hmm.
So in your system, which part needs to be addressed and cooed or talked to or held to find the sugar for your bread instead of that salt?
Okay.
Where's the corrective?
Okay.
Yeah.
So where's the corrective? How do we find what we need, right?
To
Okay.
atone, remedy, you know.
Well, let's get into
where
that.
it's edible.
One of the major things that I've found that we need to correct our creation, or to create what we truly want, is by getting rid of the wrong thing. First of all, we have to do that. because there's so much of the wrong stuff stacked up on us. I just remodeled a house for over 6 years, and now that I'm done with it and cashed in, I really feel the fact that that house was on top of me. I mean, but it's funny because I went in to fix something for the lady who bought it because I just never turn on our swamp cooler, and apparently it had a leak in it, and so I was just like, okay, I'll come over and fix it. But I had to go in and do some things on the inside of the house with the switch and stuff for the swamp cooler. Long story short, I could tell she's living in the house. She's on top of the house. But I was underneath this house, same house. To her, it's this beautiful treasure. To me, it was the most terrible burden. Like, this house was a tyrant, you know? And it's the way it can be when we really look at things. One person's trash is really another person's treasure. So when I got rid of the house and the money came into the bank account, all of a sudden I'm free. She was yelling at me to get done. Energetically, she was yelling at me to get done because she wanted this particular house. She did not want it to go on the market. She wanted my house. So it's a different energy mechanism. So I needed to get rid of it, and she needed to have it. And that's the way a lot of things are. What I would consider a toxin, someone might drive down the road and like flip me off, swerve in front of me, attack me, right? But actually what they're trying to do is take something from me that doesn't belong. How many people in here have heard about my revolutionary take on vampires? Nobody? Okay, here's what I found. It was awesome. I mean, it was amazing, because I've been dealing with things like vampires for a long time, because I just see what's going on in the world. And I always made them my enemy. I felt like, oh, they're sucking my energy. No, they're not. But I had to make sense of it. I've said to you guys, and I've said it over and over again, I'm a scientist. Yes, I have spiritual sight, and let's say the creator's inside of me. Well, maybe the creator's a scientist, because it darn sure this one's a scientist. And it did not make sense to me how I would get to these very high states in meditation, no drugs, no anything, just meditation. And I would get to these very high states, and I would see like a vampire. And they don't look glamorous like they look in the movies. They look like big ticks, you know, like people that are like full of like ticks, like a person version of a tick to me. And I would be like, ugh, you're so gross. And then I'd start to breathe fire on these ticks, and I'd just like utterly destroy them. These poor beings, right? Because I didn't understand that what was happening is that the vampires were trying to take something from me that didn't belong to me. But because I was holding on to the thing, they were pulling my life force from me. Once I finally made sense of it, I was meditating one time. There's a story on my website about it. I wrote the whole story out. But I was meditating, and I saw this tick up here, and I just finally was like, ugh, like, I said, if I have something in me, anything that belongs to you, take it with you and go away. And that's exactly what happened. And this being just like took off. And I was like, whoa, it's gone? I had something in me, because it would always make me wonder, how do they even find me? If vampires are these low, disgusting, gross beings, how do they find me specifically when I get to a very high state? How does that happen? It just didn't add up, you know? It didn't make total sense how they would find me. So how they find you is that they are trying to get rid of things that don't actually belong to you. Because if it belongs to me, it's mine. Nobody can take what belongs to me. It belongs to me. It's mine. So I gave this vampire gift, and then I started doing that when another one came to me when I was in a hotel room, somewhere traveling. I think it was in Arizona with my wife. And I just went into the bathroom, and I again experienced this vampire being. And this is the second time that I'd experienced him. And so this time I was like really focused, because I knew what could happen. And what happened is this being, shot up to, I don't know, something like the sun, this vampire, like I fulfilled it. Because if we're creators, another way of saying what our job is in this world, we're here to fulfill. We are fulfillers. We're givers. We're life bringers. We're light bringers, right? We don't really have any business being prejudiced against something like a vampire, especially if we don't fully understand where it came from, what its job is. We've got no business acting out that way. So this second vampire, I gave it what belonged to it, and it shot up to the sun and became this beautiful being of light. Like it was absolutely fulfilled. So it joined like the heavenly side of the vampire family because I gave it what it needed, what it was asking me for. And why not? Why not give everybody what they're asking for? So let's get into the I feel like a couple of these questions so far have come back to the basics of this divining technique that I use to do all of this. What I found is that the old yes, no, I call it old, a lot of people still use it. It's still, sometimes I use it, the yes, no, maybe technique. Is everybody aware of the yes, no, maybe technique? Okay? I started that way, and I found that my divining was somewhere around 7% accurate, and that drove me crazy. I could not stand 97% accurate because to me it meant 3% problem. And I call me a doubter, but I felt like that 3% was going to come back any moment and bite me in the butt whenever I really needed the right answer. So I set out to find why only 97% accurate. Everybody, you know who everybody blamed it on? Any guesses? Ego. Exactly. Oh, it's the ego, it's the ego. And I'm like, okay, but I really don't care if I can eat the Snickers bar or not. I really don't care. And I'm wondering why it kept saying yes, and then I do the old technique of removing all the, non-beneficial energies and frequencies and charging it, and then I'd still be in pain. And I was like, what in the world? So maybe some people can change things. That's not my talent, obviously. I'm not great at changing things. I'm great at finding things. Finding what is exactly correct right now. Because I really don't care about what I like and what I prefer. So in this system, counterclockwise is harmony. The system doesn't deal with yes, no, maybe, because that is a linear thinking pattern. And the higher self is not linear. It doesn't even speak that language. I think it's a little bit egotistical to have the higher self that can any of you look at land and who in here is a water dowser? Anybody? You've done it some?
I can, but I haven't found a well.
Okay.
I've done that.
Okay. So I find water. But I can't look at the land and tell you where the water is. I have to check. So there's a bigger part of me, let's say, bigger, more connected part of me that knows where the water is. I have to check and find the water. So I forget where in the world I was going with that. Harmony? Right.
Yes, no.
Right. Oh yeah, the linear thing. So the linear me cannot find water. The nonlinear part of me can. So why would I not speak its language? If I'm going to France, well, as rude as the French people might be, and I don't think they're rude, Parisians are rude, the French are pretty awesome. But I'd better learn how to speak some French because I'm in their land. And I shouldn't expect them, I go to their land and they have to speak my language. That is like what we're doing with divining, in my opinion, by using the yes, no, maybe technique. Because the higher self does not speak yes, no, maybe, unless it wants to. Other than that, it speaks harmony and disharmony. There are stars that their energy never really touches each other because they're not in harmony with each other. But the reason astrology and everything works is based on the harmony of bodies. Things that have plasmatic interactions with themselves. All of us in this room are in a certain degree of harmony. Otherwise, we would never be in the same room with each other, talking about the same thing. Harmony. Harmony is counterclockwise. Okay? Clockwise is disharmony. I don't know why it's that way, but I know every time I check it's that way. Okay? So we'll start there. Counterclockwise is harmony. Clockwise, disharmony. Now remember, I said in the beginning, and I'm going to kind of speed up the class right now. I said in the beginning that we have to think one thought at a time. Okay? So the way that we check things is essentially by thinking one thought and holding on to that one, and then thinking another thought. So now we're thinking two thoughts. I would say simultaneously, but not at the same time, if that makes sense. I think it will. I don't have words for some of these things, but let's say that I'm looking for a food for my inner child. Okay? First off, I will want to say, okay, what part of me needs food? Based on the reference points. I already have the 5 reference points. So what part of me needs food right now? Okay? So then my reference points are which of the 5 bodies? Okay, that's one thing. And let's say it's that leads me, so I'm checking each one. Bodies being the inner child is a body. I say that because I experience it as a body. The ego is a body. The upper heart is a body. You know, the sacred heart is a body. The higher self is a body. So you could use the word reference points. You don't have to use the word body, but there are 5 specific reference points. So the first time, if I'm checking who needs to eat, right? I'll check inner child. For me right now, no. Ego, no. Sacred heart is harmony. So I'm checking one. The first thing I'm checking is who needs to eat. So who needs to eat? So I find which one needs to eat right now. So right now, when I leave class, I'll find some food for my sacred heart, right? And then when I go to find it, I'll check, okay, sacred heart, all right? And I'll tune in completely, one thought, my sacred heart, and then I'm checking food for my sacred heart. So now I'm locked in on those 2 things simultaneously. So as if they're one thing, and it is one thing, food for the sacred heart. But first I made sure that I was completely honed in on sacred heart. Now here's another point. You can only eat 2 things. You can either eat food or poison. It's very important to know this in any divining system where you're looking for food, because we're confused. We think that whatever we can put in our mouth is a food. No, it's not. We can clearly eat poisons. And so these are our 2 options in this world as far as what we can put in our mouth, a food or a poison. So when I'm checking for a food, that's what I already know because I have programmed. And again, this is a very rich thing to start out, and I'm glad I have 2 classes doing this. But there's only 2 things I can eat, food and poison, and those 2 things are in my internal catalog. So I've already programmed what I call my quantum catalog to understand food and poison and the difference between the 2. So when I go into a store, I'm looking for a food, and my system is already programmed to where food is a what? It's a medicine. So Food is medicine. I always forget this. Medicine have it 2 E's or 2 I's. Anyway, this one has 2 E's. So a food is supposed to be a medicine. A poison is going to be something that brings you a little closer to death. It might take a while. So then when I'm going to look for a food, what I'm doing is I'm looking for something to eat that's in harmony with, in this case, my Sacred Heart. Does anybody know why?
Because the Sacred Heart came up for you, right?
Because the Sacred Heart came up for me. What the Sacred Heart wants to do is grow. Because when 2 harmonious bodies come together, it grows the energy. It's as if they are one. Two different energies coming together and making one larger energy. So if I'm eating for the Sacred Heart, I'm growing the Sacred Heart. I'm giving it the physical ability in this physical world to grow. Same thing with the inner child. My inner child, plain vanilla guy. He loves vanilla ice cream. I mean, nothing ever practically other than plain vanilla ice cream. Been on Haagen-Dazs for a few years. More than a few years, probably about 10 years now. So when my inner child says, is showing me that it wants food, I go out and find food for it. And it's usually not much. You see, I could eat whatever ice cream I prefer, and I could say, oh, this is feeding my inner child, I'm going to go have fun, it's feeding my inner child. But if it's not specifically in harmony with the inner child, it'll be like a bottomless pit. It'll be like feeding a bottomless pit. Because when you give it the correct food, you don't need much of it. I might eat like a quarter of a pint of Haagen-Dazs, and it's full. I mean, it's full. It feels like I'm just bursting of energy because I've eaten the right energy. And if I'm saying, oh, my inner child likes Rocky Road, well, how do you know? Did you check? Do you know? Or do you just feel or think? Or do you really just like Rocky Road? Because I would prefer all kinds of other ice creams. I can tell you that much. Who is me? Exactly. Who is me? At any given moment, I could be any number of things, which is why reference points. Because we're always going out and looking at what's right for me. Well, who the heck is that?
So
Yeah.
you have
Oh, one sec.
Okay, in this system,
Mm-hmm.
you got your 5 bodies. Now, can I
Yeah.
say, okay, let's say 7 chakras?
Sure.
Can I divide my body up in different ways and use this system when it still work? Or do you have to use the inner child, the Sacred Heart?
No, this system works well with any other system. So that's a great question.
But the heart, mind, soul, physical body, emotional
Absolutely.
body.
Absolutely. And a lot of times when we're looking for toxins, we'll check those bodies.
So you do your circulatory system, your digestive system.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're checking for what it's in harmony with, and you'll be surprised. But a lot of times we need to feed a system that looks foreign. We might need to feed, the let's say stomach to get the energy that we need in the small intestine.
In the stomach is what's upset.
Exactly. Exactly. So it'll show you where a connection is that you might not have seen by looking for harmony instead of yes, no. It'll show you, well, this problem that looks like it's way over here is actually connected to this. And this is why I say the mind of a child thing, because it will show you how everything is connected. This system will. Go ahead.
Could you do it like on a pack of dogs or a family or things that are bigger, more complex organisms that are separate? Like a family, like a child, father, mother, uncle.
Yes. I mean, a lot of problems that people have right now are generational things that have kind of been passed on from one to the next to the next. And so this system, what we'll do is we'll first focus on the problem, right? Make sure you've grabbed onto the problem. A lot of times I have students just tell me about the problem, not because I'm interested in hearing it, but because as they're talking about it, I lock into it. They're bringing it to life. I lock into it. I'll immediately check, well, is this a generational problem? Is it a food problem? Is it, is it a work-related problem? And then I begin to explore from there. If it's generational, is it mom's side or dad's side? And then I'm just like, I usually just tell them it's on mom's side or it's on dad's side, because I don't want to trace back generations. It's boring. But it's on mom's side. If it's connected to a chakra, I'll tell them it's, connected to the third chakra, and here's its voice. And then I find like what its voice is, what the problem is saying. And then I can tune in and then tell them what is the solution. So in other words, if there's a problem, it's usually because of a lie that's been told a long time ago that's passed on. So then the truth is the thing that always sets you free. That's the thing that people really need to, en masse, I think, understand about the truth. It has a quality.
Well, how does the truth relate to like breast cancer, which
Yeah.
tends to go down?
Well, it could be the truth of how you got it. It could be a cancer, and could be a lie that you've told yourself. Like oh, my heart isn't big enough to love so many people, or I can't love freely. I'm saying that because you ask, well, what if someone has breast cancer? Breast being very involved with love and nurturing. I can't nurture these people because fill in the blank. But a lot of times there's stories that were passed on. So then when you find the lie, which is I can't fill in the blank, or I don't love, or whatever the lie is, then the truth will be the thing that sets one free from the energetic trauma. And that's what I was getting at with the truth. It has a quality. Anytime you tell the truth or think the truth or hear the truth, it sets you free, even a little. It has that quality. If you're telling a story and it makes you feel smaller, it's got to be a lie. If you're telling any story about anything and it doesn't make you feel free, it's not the truth. Because the truth always makes you feel free, even if it's just a little bit. So lies will make you contract. Truth will make you expand. It doesn't always feel good, the truth. The truth does hurt sometimes, but being free is something that can come along with not feeling good.
Okay, so one more question. So say your mother had breast cancer, so the lie is my mother had it and I'm her daughter, so I'm gonna get it.
Yeah.
Where's the truth in that? So that person should
Yeah.
go get, the daughter should go get the test.
Yeah.
Because there is a possibility. So where's the
Yeah.
truth? Where's the lie?
Where's the, okay, so in this,
Subconsciously?
right, well, you could say subconsciously. I like that word better than unconscious. So the question was, if your mother had breast cancer, or if one's mother had breast cancer, then where is the lie? And should the child, you're not asking should the child, obviously the child should go get tested. Well, part of the lie, one layer of the lie could be,
The question is, where's the healing?
where's the healing? Well, the healing, you have to start where the problem is with the healing. First, we have to identify the problem. Part of the problem could be the story that cancer is genetic. Because maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I think there's a lot of people that are on the fence about that, certainly to where it's not a consensus among the scientific community of if it's genetic or if it isn't. Because if it was genetic, then those lines would probably be wiped out by now, because it would get everybody. So the lie could be that it's genetic. The lie could be, again, something was damaged within the heart of a woman that could be numerous generations back, to where, a woman could have been beaten. She could have lost a child and felt utterly defeated because of the loss of something so dear to her. And that alone could have caused the cancer. Just by her saying, I can't nurture who I want to nurture. I can't. She's gone. That alone can cause a cancer. So 5 minutes. Okay. Well, it's a good thing I have another class on Sunday.
So where
Great.
is the healing?
So the healing,
process.
once you find the
Oh,
lie,
the lie.
behind every lie is the truth. So then you just search for, you you break out the pendulum and you look for what's in harmony with the truth, and you just sit and you find the truth.
Okay, one more. When you say lie, do you mean limiting belief or just two different?
I mean something that's not true. Yeah, a lie is something that's not the truth.
So are you looking for the true statement? Like, are you looking to find the true statement? I am free of breast cancer. It's not
Yeah,
good.
you're looking to find, and I think I like your are you looking to find the correct statement or the true statement? Yes, and you are looking to find it. You don't want to say, oh, I know the truth, because I have lots of students who've said that, and it's not what I found, and the truth that they are saying didn't really set them free. So it's important to have like a quest with a question.
Some people would call that find the right affirmation. Do you?
Sure,
I mean,
they're affirmations. Yeah, they are affirmations. Yeah, I would say it is about finding the right affirmations. But there's specific ones. And when you find the lie, when you find out the story that you're telling that is not true, and you recognize it as a lie, the truth will automatically begin to rise up. It will show itself.
But what I don't understand is you said start with the story, the problem, the issue. So you find it, but then how do those 5 parts fit into once you've found that lie? Do Dowson ask, is the lie resting in my sacred heart? Is the lie
No,
resting,
not normally. The question was how do the 5 parts relate to what you found as the problem, or the 5 reference points? Well, you can check to see, is it in a chakra? Is the problem in a chakra? Then boom. If it is, well, then you've narrowed it down to between 7 and 12, depending on what your belief is about chakras. Well, is it right here? I go up my body. Is it first, second, third, fourth? Okay, so the problem's in the heart, okay? 5th, because it could be 2 places, right? 6th, 7th. Okay, it's only in the heart. Okay, so then I go in and I look from there. But it's important when you're looking to look, to not know. The thing about a question, in itself it implies that you don't really readily know the answer. And if you're looking for something, it's important to approach it with a question that is like open-ended, of like, I have no idea what the answer is. That's a cool place to be in a lot of cases. But, and we can talk about that in the next class. I'll get into the problems with questions and the wonderful thing about questions, because it's both. Because questions imply that you don't have the answer. So that's why yes, no, maybe doesn't tend to work as well for me as harmony and disharmony. Because harmony and disharmony, I can seek and find, and I can identify and be exact. So that's different for me than asking a question that I don't believe that I have the answer to. Because who has the answer if you don't?
For those of us that won't be here on Sunday, do you have any parting pearls of wisdom you'd like to share with us?
Parting pearls of wisdom for those who are going to be here on Sunday. Who won't be here on Sunday?
I won't.
Okay. Yeah, I would say that for one thing, you can always reach out to me to send you a pendulum. What I've found is it's best to find a pendulum that's in harmony with the higher self. Because if your pendulum is in harmony with your higher self, then everything downstream from the higher self, it's in harmony with. If you only have a pendulum that's in harmony with your sacred heart, it won't necessarily reach up to the higher self. But if you can get your hands on a pendulum that's in harmony with your higher self, everything downstream it'll work really well for. Also this, know that today, if you do the correct thing, or we are always moving up the energetic ladder. So don't get stuck on yesterday's rung. Because if you're already above it, it'll keep you stuck. It's always important to know that we're moving up. So each rung is its individual rung. They're all connected to the same ladder, so that's why the reference points, but it won't necessarily, what the right ice cream today will not necessarily be the ice cream for tomorrow. So
Does that tag on to before when you said, oh, I'm going to show you how to find the right car, the right computer? It's basically the same thing.
it's basically the same thing. Yeah. Although things like cars and things like computers, they tend to, if you can find the correct Brands seem to be very important.
It's all about, the question is basically harmony with higher self.
Harmony with higher self, or sacred heart, which is where I advise everybody to kind of stick to for a while. Once you build the energy of the sacred heart for a while, it will thrust you up into the higher self. I almost say don't even think about the higher self. Pay attention to the sacred heart, because once your physical body has what it needs, like it will thrust you upwards. And that's why I say you want to get rid of everything essentially out of your life that's pulling you down, that's in the energy that pulls down, and connect with things that pull you up.
And to find those things that are pulling you down, the question again is it in harmony with sacred heart?
Yes.
Because you don't have to ask a lot of it.
Yeah, you want to check to see if the physical objects are in harmony with the sacred heart. And for a while, you might need to keep some things around that are in harmony with even the divine ego or the inner child. But what I've found is those things are kind of transient. You can eat a steak or something, I don't know, whatever you eat that is in harmony with the divine ego, and usually like one meal will set it straight. They don't really need objects like that, because the objects are more for the physical being. Use objects as they relate to the sacred heart, and always be ready to move out of things, because once you get up to the next rung, that last rung becomes insignificant as soon as you step on it and you move your feet above it. So I think we're done. We ran a little bit late, right? Because we started a little bit late. But even though we're going to turn the class off, is there anything I need to say in closing? Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for joining us. Yes.